This video is going to be a follow-up review to the first one that I did on the Stages power meter. I've been using this for 3 months, and so I wanted to give my feedback on what I think of it. And I've been using it on my road and my cyclocross bike. And to me, that's the great thing about this power meter, is how easily I can move it from my road bike to the cross bike. And that's probably something that you can't do with most other power meters out there on the market, because if you use something like a power tap that uses the wheel, my road bike is standard road brakes and my cross bike is disc brakes, so I wouldn't be able to use that. If you use a pedal type power meter, then you wouldn't be able to move it from one to the other, because I use mountain bike pedals on my cross bike and standard road pedals on my road bike. So that's one thing that I really appreciate about this power meter. I've been using it with the Garmin Edge 510. And the other great thing about this power meter is just how it just simply disappears. It's one of those technologies that you really don't have to mess with. I mean, it comes on when you start pedaling, and it goes to sleep after you stop pedaling for a few minutes. It works perfectly with the Garmin Edge 510. I have not had any instance where I didn't get a reading. The battery is still strong, and I'm going to show you something that's really cool about this, and that there's an app that I really just discovered this past week for this power meter, and it's actually a really useful app that goes along with the power meter. It does have a battery indicator, which I'll show you here in a second. So again, just one of those technologies that just works when it's supposed to. It only adds like 20 grams to your bike. I don't even know the thing is there, except for the fact that I'm getting a reading of power on my Garmin Edge 510. This is the first power meter that I've ever owned. I've used a few in the past just for a week or so, but to incorporate a power meter into my training has really benefited to help me understand the effort that I use when I'm pedaling. So I did a field test. I was able to get my zones, and my racing season doesn't start for another few months, and so I'm more of into that tempo type workout. And the power meter really helps you not go too hard, but go hard enough. And so I've been using it, yesterday I did a 45-minute tempo ride with a power meter at 250 watts. So again, really helps you gauge your power. And I also use a heart rate monitor with my Edge 510. So I have on the same screen heart rate and power. And that has really helped me to understand what my heart rate should be for my zones. I've always had a good idea of what my heart rate is as far as the zone I'm supposed to be in. And using power has really helped me just to really hone in on what my heart rate should be for the specific zone. I've used this power meter in the rain, but not a heavy downpour. But the fact that Team Sky uses it, and they're based in the UK, and they probably get a lot more rain days than we do. We get a lot of heavy rain in the summertime where I'm at, but you know, the battery is pretty sealed, and I don't think there's going to be any problem with water getting inside. One really nice thing about this is the fact that I now have cadence. And I mentioned that in my first video, but I've never had cadence on a bicycle before, just because I really don't want to run wires all the way down the frame and put a little sensor on my crank. This thing, just because it knows when you're pedaling each pedal stroke, gives you cadence feedback, and that's a screen you can program on your Garmin to show, and it works really well. I mean, every time that I've powered up the Garmin, I've gotten the power reader and I've gotten the cadence. So that's another kind of side benefit to this power meter. Now mine is obviously the Ultegra one here, but you can get this in a lot of different crank manufacturers. All the Shimano ones, you can get it for mountain bikes as well. So you can jump on Stages website, which I think is stagescycling.com, and see if the crank set that you use would be compatible. In other words, if they make the left crank arm to go with your crank set. Let me show you real quick the app that you can use with this, and it's the Stages Power Meter app. And the way that you do this is, I've got the bike close to me and I've spun the pedals to kind of wake up the power meter, but when you open the app, it'll kind of look for the device and you'll see it. Now, if you didn't have your bike near, if you haven't woken it up, you won't see anything here. So that's what I want. I want the Stages power. Now, even though it doesn't read anything here, it's because the bike is not moving. But if you were putting power in the pedals, you actually have power here on this app. And you've got cadence also. So if you didn't want to buy a head unit and you rode with your phone on your handlebars, in other words, you had a mount to hold it on there, you could actually use this as your head unit. Now, the downside to that obviously is you've got to keep your screen on, and you probably, it's going to be a little bit hard to see compared to a Garmin because the Garmin's more of an LCD. And this one would, you'd use your battery up on your phone pretty quick if you did that. But the option's there if you want to use it. Now, what I've used this app for recently, I went to sleep. I got to spin the pedals here. Hold on. So, one thing that you can do with this is a firmware update. And there it goes. And so you'll see here it's kind of grayed out. That's because it's up to date. I just updated the firmware, and so this was lit up. It gives feedback from the unit, and you would just tap this and update your firmware, and it takes about 5 minutes. And that's a really cool feature, that you can just update your firmware from an app on an Android or iOS phone. Here's the battery indicator, and since this meter is only about 3 months old, the battery is still pretty strong. But that's really cool that you can open up the app and see how much battery you have left on your power meter. It's got a tools section, so if you tap here, it'll read your power meter and get some data off of it. So it's got the serial number, the Ant Plus ID number, it even shows your crank length and all that. And that's really cool. You can also do a zero reset, so you can kind of recalibrate the power meter by tapping here. And it tells me my crank's not in the correct position, so I've got to put it straight down. So let me do that. So the crank is pointing straight down. Let's just hit retry here, see if it works. It does actually show you the temperature, so I've recalibrated the power meter, and you can tap here and the temperature will change from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So it shows me the temperature right now, and it recalibrated the power meter. It has this section here that I've kind of messed with, but I don't really know yet how it works. So sorry I can't give feedback, but it's called high speed, and I think it will give you a reading maybe over a certain time period, and it does it in it looks like a CSV file, and you can probably email it to yourself. Again, I've not messed around with this, so I can't give feedback there, but if that works, that'd be pretty cool to be able to measure power over a certain section using the app. But really the main thing that I use this app for is checking the battery and doing firmware updates, since I do have a Garmin head unit. One benefit to me with using the power meter is that it kind of livens up my road riding a little bit. I spend a lot of time on cross bikes and mountain bikes, and road riding, can be a little bit of a drudgery sometimes, because I actually end up training alone a lot just because of my work schedule, especially during the week. Most of my rides are solo. So just having that feedback gives me a little bit more motivation, a little bit more excitement to my road riding. Now let me also say that on the Edge 510 or any Garmin unit or similar type head unit, I've found that the 3-second average setting is the best one to use. You can do a longer one, like a 10-second average at maybe even 30 seconds, or you can do every pedal stroke what the power is. The 3-second average is more constant. The one that's every pedal stroke, it just fluctuates too much. It's too hard to hold a certain power. The 3-second average is the best one that I found for just trying to hold a steady power over a certain interval, certain effort. So that's going to wrap up this follow-up review on the Stages power meter. There's really not a whole lot to discuss on this thing other than the fact that it works. It works really well. I've never had a problem with it. It's durable. It's a really good price point for a power meter. Especially considering the fact that you could move it from one bike to the other if it uses the same type of bottom bracket interface and same crank length. So it's one that I can really recommend if you've ever wanted to get a power meter but didn't want to go out and spend $2,000-$3,000 on a meter. Team Sky uses it, so it's used in the professional ranks. The only downside that I could see to this meter is the fact that it's left crank arm only. Now, if I'm a betting man, I would say that maybe in the next year or two, Stages may come out with a right crank arm. And so by only having the left, you're only going to get power for one pedal. If you have one that measures both, like something like a Power Tap or a Quark or something like that, you can actually get feedback for both pedals to know if you're dominating one foot or the other. But it's to me it works great. I don't need anything more than what it is. So again, the price point is excellent for this power meter, and like I said, it's one that I can highly recommend. I haven't used it a very long time, but I don't think that I'm going to have any problems with durability for this power meter. So thanks for watching.